I mean, come on. She laughed, her wine glass glinting in the kitchen light. He's sweet, but he's just a placeholder. That word, placeholder, struck me with a force I hadn't anticipated. I was supposed to be at work, but the freeways were clear for once. I'd pulled into our driveway just in time to hear the delicate chime of wine glasses and the hollow sound of forced compliments drifting from the open window. Her voice was sharp, unmistakable. She was describing me as if I were the opening act for a headliner who hadn't arrived yet. I didn't knock. I didn't clear my throat. I didn't storm inside demanding an explanation. I just stood there on the porch, letting the night air grow cold, and listened as her words dug their own grave. It wasn't just what she said, but the sheer ease with which she said it. It flowed from her like a well-rehearsed line, a sentiment she had been practicing for weeks. The man who paid her tuition, bought her textbooks, worked double shifts, and sacrificed vacations so she could build her future had been reduced to a punchline shared over a bottle of Chardonnay. She had sworn we were a team. God, she'd said it every time we sat down to budget, every time I handed over another check for her education. We're building this together, Ethan. Together. It's funny how people who use that word so often rarely mean equal partnership. They mean my effort, for their benefit, and I fell for it completely. I didn't just buy into the dream, I financed it. No student loans, no financial aid applications, just me, scraping together every dollar of overtime from my warehouse job and dipping into the retirement fund my father left me when he passed away. I told myself it was an investment in something greater. In her, in us. But standing there, bathed in the dim glow of the porch light, I understood she had already moved on. In her mind, I was already gone, replaced not by a specific person yet, but by the abstract idea of someone better, someone more refined, someone who didn't come home with engine grease under his fingernails, someone who didn't spend his days operating forklifts and wearing safety goggles, someone who would fit seamlessly into the new, polished narrative she was carefully crafting for herself on campus. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I opened my laptop and began to write. The email I drafted wasn't emotional. It was formal, professional, and didn't mention her name. It was a simple inquiry to the university's development office. I expressed my interest in discussing the possibility of establishing a private, endowed scholarship, a significant one. It would be in honor of someone who believed profoundly in the power of education, humility, and relentless hard work. Her mother. Her mom had passed away 5 years prior from a vicious form of cancer, the kind that silently devours a person while everyone around them pretends things are getting better. I was there for all of it, sometimes more than her own daughter was. I drove her to chemotherapy appointments, picked up her prescriptions, and held her hand the night she whispered to me, "You're the only one who really sees people for who they are, Ethan." She hadn't said that to her daughter. She had said it to me. That memory, which should have been painful, suddenly provided a moment of absolute clarity. So, I made my offer. $250,000, paid in installments over 5 years. There was one condition. Her daughter, my placeholder-wielding girlfriend, could never be a recipient. Not by name, not by merit, not by any association. The scholarship would be exclusively for students from single-parent households who worked part-time jobs and could provide documented proof of financial hardship. Kids like I had been 20 years ago. Kids who would never, ever call their benefactor a placeholder over drinks. I signed the draft of the email and sat back, rereading it. The anger had vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp focus. Her betrayal didn't deserve a fiery explosion. It deserved precision. I hit send at 2:14 a.m. 4 hours later, I made her breakfast. Bacon, eggs, and toasted English muffins. Just how she liked them. She kissed my cheek and called me a saint. I smiled. She never noticed the subtle shift in my eyes, the deep, measured calm of a man who had already made a decision. The days that followed felt normal, at least to her. I still picked her up from class on rainy afternoons. I still brought her coffee during late-night study sessions. I still nodded along as she talked excitedly about graduation. But I had already begun to quietly empty my side of the closet. Piece by piece, the suit I wore to her mother's funeral was the first to go. Then my cufflinks, my journals, the framed photo of us at her first scholarship ceremony. I took it off the refrigerator and replaced it with a simple magnet that read, "It's not revenge. It's realignment." She never noticed. It's astonishing how easy it is to become invisible while standing in plain sight. While she was polishing her professional networking profile and curating posts for her social media with captions like "Grind now, glow later," I was silently constructing something she could never touch. She would kiss me in the morning, wearing the non-prescription glasses she believed made her look intellectual, and tell me about a professor who just gets me. I would nod, hand her a coffee made exactly to her specifications, 3 stevia packets, almond milk, a dash of cinnamon, and she would smile, oblivious to the tectonic shifts happening just beneath the surface, completely unaware that she had already been written out of my future. But I was writing something, too. It began with a name, Dean Lowell. I recalled the way her mother, Sarah, used to speak of him, with a quiet reverence. "He's the last one at that school who gives a damn about who you are, not just what's on your resume," she'd said, back when the hospital bills were a mountain and her daughter had stopped visiting because it was too hard to see her like that. But I never stopped visiting. I listened. I learned what was truly important to that woman, and one of those things was Dean Lowell. I found his direct email address buried deep within the university's development office website, not the generic donation inbox. I wanted my message to bypass the administrative assistants and land directly in the lap of the man whose name was engraved on the side of the humanities building. The email I sent was not dramatic. It was clean, formal, and respectful. "Dean Lowell, I am writing to discuss the establishment of a permanent endowed scholarship in memory of the late Sarah Mayfield. She was not only a supporter of this institution, but a person whose values should define the very students this university is proud to produce. I am prepared to commit $250,000 to create an annual award for students who embody those values: integrity, humility, and overcoming financial hardship. My only stipulation is that the endowment be fully irrevocable upon disbursement and that no direct relative of MS. Mayfield be eligible, now or ever. I trust this is a manageable condition. Thank you for your consideration. A private donor." He responded in under 3 hours. His email began with a single, powerful sentence: "I knew Sarah. I would be honored to make this happen." Legal and finance were brought into the loop. I reviewed the draft agreement that same day. It was sharp, airtight, with no loopholes and no possibility of reversal. Once the funds were transferred, they were locked in place forever. There were forms to sign, identity documents to verify, and public anonymity agreements. I insisted on only one thing: no recognition for me, only her mother's name, alongside a quote I provided for the commemorative plaque, in honor of a woman who believed in people, not performance. It was something her mother used to say when we discussed the kind of daughter she had raised. She never said it with pride. The university acted swiftly once the terms were finalized. When someone dangles a 6-figure donation and doesn't ask for their name on a building, the paperwork moves at lightning speed. Within a week, the fund was structured and scheduled for an official announcement at the commencement ceremony. The recipient would be selected by a committee based on character, not GPA, not club memberships, not networking prowess. Character. And she would never qualify. Not with the way she paraded me around in private, but erased me in public. Not with the way she spoke about how people like us have to play the game, as if integrity were an accessory you only wore when it matched your outfit. The moment I received final confirmation, I scheduled the wire transfer. I didn't want the university waiting for a check in the mail while she was still laughing about her plans to trade up after graduation. She'd said that part to her friend Chloe while swiping through a dating app during a movie night. I was in the next room. I didn't say a word. I just adjusted the scholarship's funding timeline from 5 years to 3. More aggressive, more impactful. I still paid our rent. I still smiled at her from across the dinner table. I still kissed her shoulder when she feigned sleep to dodge conversations about our future. But that future was already being built, quietly, with every email, every signed document, every dollar I rerouted behind her back. Not to punish her, but to elevate the one woman in her family who had ever truly seen me, who had ever bothered to say thank you. The night before the final transfer, I sat in my car outside the university, staring at the warm glow of the administration building. I remembered helping her move into her first dorm, hauling boxes up 3 flights of stairs while she took selfies and told her new friends I was just helping out. I remembered the smug look on her face when I paid her final tuition bill online and she'd said, "Guess I really picked the right guy." Yes, you did, I thought. But you didn't keep him. It was a brunch spot that smelled of lavender soap and self-importance. You know the type. Exposed brick walls, $20 pancakes, and laughter loud enough to scare away sincerity. She had been pushing for me to meet her new circle for weeks, and I finally gave in, ignoring the part of me that knew exactly how this would end. They arrived late. Naturally, all 5 of them, a matched set of perfume and performative energy, all far too dressed up for 10:30 on a Sunday morning. Her hair was styled in that new effortless way that takes 2 hours and a curling iron. She wore the pearl earrings I'd given her for our anniversary, and when one of her friends complimented them, she didn't even blink. "Vintage," she said, with no mention of me. The introductions were brief and clipped. I was Ethan, not her boyfriend, not her partner, not even the guy who's been helping me through school, which would have been a generous, if incomplete, truth. Just Ethan, as if I were some stranger who had wandered over to their table holding a credit card. Then came the moment. I don't recall who asked, some girl with a voice like radio static and a degree in public relations. She leaned forward, oozing fake curiosity, and asked, "So, what are your plans after graduation?" "Big job, big move." And without a moment's hesitation, without even a thought, she replied, "Well, hopefully someone with some real ambition steps in next." I didn't react. Not outwardly. Not in the way a placeholder was supposed to, I guess. One of her friends, the only one with enough self-awareness to look embarrassed, choked on her mimosa and let out a half laugh. "You mean not the guy paying your bills?" She didn't flinch. She didn't deny it. She just smirked and took another sip of her drink, as if she'd been waiting for someone to finally say the quiet part out loud. I folded my napkin, flagged down the waiter, and paid the entire bill. All of it, even their bottomless brunch cocktails and the extra orders of truffle hash they had barely touched. Of course they expected me to pay. The invisible man at the table always pays. I left before they could bring the dessert menus. She texted me an hour later, "Sorry if brunch felt awkward. They're just intense. THX for paying red. No apology, no acknowledgement, just a red heart emoji as if it could cover the rot." That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't pace. I didn't drink. I documented. I pulled up my copies of every signed agreement, the scholarship's legal structure, the wire transfer schedules, the beneficiary restrictions. I added one final touch, a formal clause confirming the donor had no current or future familial or relational ties to the namesake's descendants. Just a small piece of legal elegance to bolt the door she didn't even know she was trying to open. The next morning, I transferred the first installment. $100,000 vanished from my account in an instant. Irrevocable. Tax documented. Routed through a donor-advised fund I had established 6 months prior, just in case. I called it contingency planning. She used to call it overthinking. But planning is only paranoia until you need it. By noon, the confirmation email arrived from the university. Subject: Fund activated. Recognition imminent. I smiled, closed my laptop, and went to make her lunch. She came home buzzing with energy, telling me her friends thought I was super chill. I said I appreciated that. She didn't notice I had started marking my calendar with silent milestones, dates that meant something only to me. Not our anniversary, not her graduation, but the dates that mattered now. 2 weeks until the public announcement, 3 weeks until the recipient selection, 4 weeks until the commencement program went to print with a donor name she would never be allowed to mention in polite company. She kept talking that night about jobs she hadn't applied for and dreams she had lifted from social media bios, about how she couldn't wait to finally be on the radar. I nodded, passed the salt, and let her speak, and when she said, "You'll always be part of this journey," I nearly laughed. Not because it was sweet, but because I had already become part of the story. Just not her story. Her mother's name would now live on forever on plaques, in announcements, in the grateful whispers of students who earned what she had mocked, students who actually understood the meaning of sacrifice, students who would be given a real chance, not an illusion tied to brunch tables and a desperate chase for validation. I had become invisible to her, but I had made sure I would be unforgettable to the university. I printed everything, not just the donation agreements and tax forms. Everything. Every tuition bill, every semester's fee breakdown, every single overpriced textbook receipt from the campus bookstore with my name at the bottom. Even the meal plans I had paid for when she claimed she needed to focus on networking and couldn't be bothered with cooking. It was all there, organized, time-stamped, and cataloged. Call it overkill, I called it insulation. Because when people like her lose control, their first instinct isn't remorse. It's retaliation. I knew that once she found out, she would try to find an angle, some lawyer cousin, some half-baked social media tirade about emotional abuse or financial coercion. So I left nothing to chance. Every dollar I had ever given her was documented and paid directly to the institution, never to her. No cash, no favors, just clean, boring, unambiguous transfers. It was the most romantic paper trail you've never seen. I read over the donation agreement one last time, sitting alone in a quiet bank conference room they'd reserved for the final execution. The contract was flawless. The scholarship would go live immediately with the first payment, and each subsequent deposit was already scheduled. The language was airtight. The Sarah Mayfield Memorial Endowment shall provide an annual scholarship to undergraduate students who demonstrate exceptional integrity, financial need, and a commitment to their community. Relatives of MS. Mayfield are not eligible, and the identity of the benefactor shall remain confidential unless otherwise specified. I didn't specify. I didn't want the credit. I wanted the impact. I wanted students who reminded me of the kid I used to be, sitting in a cold dorm room, trying to calculate if I could afford both ramen and laundry detergent, and then getting a phone call that changed everything. And I wanted that call to come in her mother's name, the woman who once told me, "If my daughter ever turns into one of those people who forgets who helped her up, you remind her, gently or not at all." I chose the second option. At the bottom of the agreement, there was a blank line. I stared at it, letting the silence of the room settle. The pen in my hand clicked once, then again. Then I signed. Clean, sharp, final. The moment my name touched that paper, it was over. There would be no reversals, no appeals, no tearful phone call from an ex begging to just talk about this. I was no longer her sponsor, her safety net, or her silent investor. I was something else now. I was her mother's legacy, and I made sure of it. Dean Lowell called me that evening. He seemed at a loss for words at first. I could hear him shuffling papers, clearing his throat, likely trying to connect the dots between the guy he'd met in passing at a fundraiser and the ghost behind a $250,000 endowment. I just wanted to say this is an extraordinary gift. And Sarah, well, she always believed in second chances, in character, in he trailed off. I answered simply, she believed in me more than her daughter ever did. There was a long, sincere pause on the other end of the line. Then he said, almost to himself, she really did. That was all I needed. The file was sealed, locked away in the university's permanent fund index, an account that would outlive all of us. The kind of paperwork that doesn't just disappear when feelings get hurt or relationships fall apart. Cold, clean, and indelible. Later that night, she came home bubbling with excitement about some influencer internship her friend might help her land. She talked about moving to a real city, about wanting a man who already has something built. She didn't even notice the irony. She was wearing a hoodie I'd bought her during her sophomore year. I watched her scroll through her phone, laugh at someone's story, and joke about being too hot to settle. I smiled and told her dinner was almost ready. She said, "You're honestly such a blessing sometimes." "Only sometimes," I replied. She grinned, kissed the top of my head, and went to take a shower. I stood in the kitchen, stirring a sauce I no longer cared to taste. And in the other room, on my desk, sat a sealed folder with a single line printed on the cover, "Confidential, fully executed." There's a type of silence that isn't empty, it's full, it's loaded. Every movement I made after that was just noise. She didn't know it yet, but the door had closed. Not slammed, not locked, just shut forever. The invitation arrived in a soft, cream-colored envelope embossed with the university seal. The kind of formal correspondence they only send when they want something from you, or want to make something of you. She waved it in my face as if it were proof of her destiny. "Probably about honors," she said, her voice dripping with confidence. "Or a commencement spotlight." I just smiled. "You deserve it," she beamed, musing about how her professors had finally recognized her potential. Then she asked if I could pick up some oat milk on my way home from work. That Monday morning, she left early. She'd curled her hair and wore the fitted navy blazer I'd bought her for her first internship interview, back when she still said things like, "We're in this together." The click of her heels on the hardwood floor sounded like punctuation marks. She was giddy, practicing her acceptance smile in the hallway mirror. I held the door for her and said, "Good luck." She smirked. "Luck's got nothing to do with it." No, it didn't. The administrative building was cold that morning. The sky was overcast. The HVAC hummed, and the long hallway echoed her every step like a warning shot. Students passed by, oblivious to the shift in the atmosphere. She adjusted her collar and knocked once on the door that read, "Dean Lowell, Office of Advancement and Development. Come in." He looked strange. Not angry, not confused. Just pale, as if someone had just handed him a truth he didn't know how to carry. "Please have a seat." She did, crossing her legs, poised and ready. "Is this about the commencement program?" He didn't answer directly. He simply slid a single sheet of paper across the vast mahogany desk toward her. No preamble, no flourish. It was an official announcement, printed on university letterhead. After a short introductory paragraph, there was the name, the Sarah Mayfield Memorial Endowment. Annual scholarship, $250,000 fund fully activated. Recipients selected by character, need, and merit. Field of study, communications and public ethics. Established by an anonymous private benefactor. She blinked, leaning back in her chair. "No, wait. This has to be a mistake." She passed away. The dean gently raised a hand. "It's not a mistake." Her voice tightened. "But why would someone who would even do this?" He let out a long breath, one he seemed to have been holding since she walked in. "Your boyfriend did," he said softly. "Ethan, he asked us not to notify you, but given your relationship to the namesake, we felt you should see it before the announcement goes public." Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She just stared at the document, as if willing the words to rearrange themselves into a different story. They didn't. The quote printed beneath the header read, "In honor of a woman who believed in people, not performance." Her mother's words. Words she hadn't heard in years. She whispered, "He never said anything." The dean nodded. That was the point. She scanned the page again, desperately searching for a loophole, a reversal clause, some sign that this wasn't final. But there it was in stark black ink, endowed, activated, irrevocable, and her name was absent. Not mentioned, not thanked, not even acknowledged. She cleared her throat. "Did he say anything to you?" He hesitated, then replied, just one thing. What? He said. She believed in me more than her daughter ever did. The silence in the room became heavy, sinking. Her hands shook slightly as she pushed the paper back across the desk. The dean didn't touch it. She stood up slowly, nodding as if she understood. She didn't. Outside the office, the hallway felt louder. Students brushed past her, unaware that something in her life had just calcified into stone. She walked to the end of the corridor. She didn't cry. She didn't call anyone. She just stared out at the campus lawn through the large glass window. For a fleeting moment, she almost turned back, almost asked for a copy of the announcement, a record, a souvenir. But what would she even say? That her boyfriend, her placeholder, had just buried her name beneath her mother's and built a monument she couldn't touch. That the first legacy tied to her family name had absolutely nothing to do with her. She didn't have the words. She just stood there, frozen. She didn't walk across campus. She marched. Her heels cracked against the pavement like punctuation marks in a sentence she wasn't ready to finish. The clouds had begun to break, letting slivers of sun through, but she didn't notice. Her jaw was clenched, her grip on her phone so tight that the screen left an imprint on her palm. She was spiraling, but not with grief. This was pure disbelief. She called Chloe twice. No answer. She tried a third time. Chloe finally picked up, her voice low and careful, as if she already knew what this call was about. "Hey, we need to talk," the girlfriend snapped. "Now." A pause, then a sigh. "Fine." The courtyard behind the library. 10 minutes. When she arrived, Chloe was already sitting at a weathered concrete picnic table. She had a black coffee in front of her and only looked up as the girlfriend approached. "What the hell did you do?" she hissed, not even bothering to sit. Chloe raised an eyebrow. "You're going to have to be more specific." "You know exactly what I'm talking about. The scholarship. My mom's name." "Him." The dean said he didn't want to tell me, but someone obviously knew. Someone helped him get to the dean. "You." Chloe didn't deny it. She just stirred her coffee. "I swear to God, Chloe, if this was some kind of joke." "It wasn't," Chloe said flatly. "And you should lower your voice. I trusted you." "No," Chloe said, finally meeting her eyes. "You used me. The same way you used him." The girlfriend froze. "I told him your mom had a connection to the dean." He asked, very politely, if she'd ever mentioned anyone from the school who still cared about the kind of student she wanted you to be. "You know, before you stopped visiting her, before you started calling people placeholders." Her face twisted in anger. "So what? You just gave him permission to hijack my mom's name?" "She's not your trademark," Chloe retorted. "You told us he was temporary. I guess he just made his time here permanent. Just not in your life." The girlfriend's lips parted in that familiar wounded posture she adopted when things didn't go her way. "You don't know what he was like." "I do, actually." Chloe's voice didn't rise, but it cut like steel. "I saw the guy who picked you up when your car died during midterms. The one who paid for all your GRE prep books. The one who sat by your mom's bed and held her hand when you couldn't be bothered to drive across town." "That's not fair." "And neither was telling us he didn't matter. You called him a financial stepping stone. You said, and I quote, 'Once I graduate, he goes back to whatever box he crawled out of.'" The slap wasn't loud, just sharp enough to knock Chloe's coffee over, spilling it across her notes. The girlfriend stood there, chest heaving, eyes wild. Chloe didn't even flinch. "You want to be mad? Fine. But don't you dare pretend you didn't build this. Don't pretend you're the victim." She stood, turned, and walked away, her shoes echoing in the quiet space behind the library. The girlfriend stood there, frozen again, her hand shaking from the impact. Not from the slap, but from the complete unraveling of everything she thought she controlled. People on campus started to talk, not in cruel ways, but in a manner that was far worse, with pity. "Oh, that's the girl whose boyfriend started the scholarship. Wait, you mean her mom's name is on the plaque? That's crazy. And she didn't even know." No one said anything directly to her face, but they didn't have to. Because now, every time she walked down that hallway outside Dean Lowell's office, she had to pass the announcement board. And there, right at the top, in gold print on thick parchment paper, sat her mother's name. Eternal, a legacy carved not by blood, but by choice. And she was just a student now. Not a partner, not a visionary, not the rising star she had imagined herself to be, just another graduate whose name wasn't on the wall. Graduation was supposed to be her day. She had envisioned it for years, a perfectly curated moment. The dress, the shoes, the false eyelashes that would make her eyes pop in photos. She wanted the firm handshake with the dean, the posed smile with her diploma, the roar of the crowd erupting just for her. The girl who had hustled her way through 4 years with catch-and-ready grit. She got the dress. She got the handshake. But the rest of it was not what she had imagined. She noticed it early on, before the ceremony had even begun. The whispers in the crowd weren't about her. They were about the scholarship. Did you hear about the new fund? It's huge. Life-changing. I think the girl who got it is only 20, graduating a year early. Did you see the donor's note in the program? It gives me chills. She tried to tune it out, focusing on her hair, her gown, her walk. She looked good. She always did. But as she lined up in the wings of the auditorium, she couldn't help but scan the crowd. There was no sign of him. She had assumed he would still come. A part of her had even hoped for it, that he would sit quietly in a back row, wearing that department store suit she used to mock, and clap politely when her name was called. She thought maybe he would still care, still show up like he always did. But the seat she had mentally saved for him was empty. No note, no text, no placeholder, just a vacancy that mirrored the growing emptiness behind her ribs. When her name was called, the applause was fine, polite, nothing more. A few scattered whoops from classmates she barely knew. Chloe clapped but didn't stand. She waved, smiled, and walked across that stage as if it meant something. It didn't, because exactly 2 minutes later, the dean stepped up to the podium, cleared his throat, and said, "Before we proceed, I'd like to take a moment to honor someone who exemplifies the values this university holds sacred: perseverance, integrity, and quiet excellence." She knew immediately. She didn't even need to hear the name, but she heard it anyway. The inaugural recipient of the Sarah Mayfield Memorial Endowment is Anna James. The applause was thunderous. More than thunderous, it was sustained, the kind of ovation that carries real weight. People rose to their feet. Professors nodded with approval. Even the usually disengaged students in the back leaned forward. Anna was everything the scholarship described: a first-generation college student, a single mother who worked 2 jobs while finishing her degree a year early. She walked to the stage with tears on her face and dignity in her spine. And right there, in front of the entire graduating class, she received a full-ride offer to graduate school tuition, housing, and all expenses covered by the endowment. The one in her mother's name, funded by her ex-boyfriend, and awarded to someone who still remembered what humility looked like. She didn't clap. She couldn't. She just stared down at the program in her lap. Her fingers traced the donor line as if she could smudge the ink away. Endowed by an anonymous benefactor in memory of Sarah Mayfield, who believed in character over charm. Beneath it, in parentheses, founding donor name available upon request. She flipped to the back, to the small print donor acknowledgments, and there it was. His name, neatly printed in a modest font. No accolades, no job title, just him. Ethan Whittaker. The name she once said would never matter after she leveled up. And now, it was permanently inked into the legacy of the university. She felt a wave of nausea, not because he had done it, but because he hadn't told her. He hadn't begged her to be a part of it. He hadn't tried to impress her with it. He had simply done it without her. She scanned the crowd again, this time desperately. Still no sign of him, just a sea of faces clapping for someone else, smiling for a woman who had earned her applause the hard way. She wanted to leave, but the cameras were on, and there is no polite way to walk out of your own insignificance. So she sat there, silent and stiff, surrounded by the sound of someone else's name being celebrated, her mother's name, but not hers. The story grew legs before she could stop it. It slipped through lecture halls, leaked into faculty lounges, and wedged itself into whispered conversations between students who had never even learned her name until it was tethered to someone else's glory. The scholarship had already become a campus legend and worse, an aspirational goal. They called it the Mayfield Fund now, as if it had always existed. As if her mother had always had a plaque waiting for her in the Hall of Legacy Donors. As if the endowment wasn't inked in stunned silence and powered by a man she once told her friends was just a guy with an okay credit score. A week after graduation, she couldn't even go to the library without someone asking, "Are you related to the Mayfield Fund? You're the daughter, right? That's incredible. Wait, didn't your boyfriend start that? Or ex?" She nodded when she had to, smiled when she could stomach it. But the questions were never clean, because the moment they connected the dots that yes, she was asterisk that asterisk Mayfield, and yes, she used to date asterisk the asterisk donor, something in their expression always shifted. The awe turned to discomfort, the admiration curdled into pity, and then came the real questions, the ones she had no script for. "So, how come you weren't mentioned in the program? Why didn't you help launch it? It's literally your mom. Didn't he use your money to start it?" That last one always stung the hardest, because even the people asking assumed she must have done something to deserve partial credit. That maybe she'd helped design the terms, or spoken to the committee, or at least donated $1. But she hadn't. Not a cent, not a sentence. The closest she ever got to the endowment was the look on Dean Lowell's face when he told her the door was already closed. One of her old professors stopped her on the quad and said, "I didn't realize you and Mr. Whittaker were no longer together. He spoke so warmly of your mother in the donor meetings, said she taught him more about dignity than anyone he'd ever met." She forced a smile. She was special. The professor nodded. He honored her beautifully. Then he walked away. That night, alone in her new apartment, she stared at the graduation photo on the wall, her in her cap and gown, grinning widely, diploma half twisted in her hand. The sun had caught her cheekbones just right. She looked important, accomplished. But now, the image mocked her. It wasn't her name in the announcements. It wasn't her applause that people remembered. It wasn't her legacy painted in gold lettering for generations of students to pass by and say, "I want to be that." She walked to the wall, gripped the frame with both hands, and yanked. The nail screeched against the drywall. A corner of the frame cracked. Glass splintered at the edge but didn't shatter. She didn't hang it back up. She didn't store it away gently. She left it face down on the floor. Everywhere she went now, she lived inside someone else's story, one she hadn't authored, one she couldn't rewrite. And worst of all, it was the only story people still cared about. Even Chloe, cold and collected Chloe, had posted a photo from graduation with the caption, "Integrity isn't loud, but it lasts." The comments were full of people asking about the scholarship, about the donor, about whether it would be expanded next year. No one asked about her. She tried to reclaim the narrative briefly, making a social media post of her own. "Proud of how far I've come. The journey is only beginning." But no one cared. The algorithm didn't bite. 37 likes, 5 from relatives. One from an old high school classmate who thought she still lived in Florida. She was invisible now, but not in the way she'd once feared, left behind, unnoticed. No, this was worse. She was seen, but only as a footnote. The ex-girlfriend, the daughter of the scholarship's namesake, the girl who lost the plot while holding the pen, and the man she thought she could replace. He had vanished from her life completely, but he had stayed on campus, etched into stone forever. It arrived on a Tuesday, stuffed awkwardly into the rusted apartment mailbox she'd never bothered to replace. No postmark, no sender, just her name written in a hand she hadn't seen in weeks. Familiar, but steadier now, colder. There was no seal on the envelope, just folded flaps tucked into each other, as if the sender didn't want to make it feel too formal, too final. At first, She thought it might be from the university, a delayed certificate or some leftover paperwork. But the weight of it was wrong. There was something inside, thicker than paper, softer than a brochure. She carried it upstairs as if it might explode. She waited a full hour before opening it, pouring a glass of wine she didn't finish and lighting a candle she immediately blew out. Her hands hovered over the flap like it might scream when she peeled it back, and maybe, in a way, it did. Inside was a single photograph. She recognized it instantly. It was her, maybe 5 years old, clinging to her mother's leg near the campus fountain. Her mother looked young, tired, but beautiful. She had that kind of understated strength that always made people underestimate her until it was too late. In the photo, her mother was pointing toward the old administration building, as if telling her daughter, "This is where it all happens. This is what we fight for." She had no memory of the picture being taken, but she knew who had taken it. Behind the photo was a note, handwritten, neat, centered, no fluff. "She believed in me. I believed in you. Only one of us was right." That was it. No signature, no initials, no date. She stared at the words, willing them to move, to shift, to soften. They didn't. They just sat there, simple and devastating. She flipped the paper over, desperate for context. Nothing. No plea, no bitterness. Just that single sentence, heavy as concrete. She gripped the photo too tightly, almost creasing it, then set it down and reached for her laptop. It was a reflex more than a decision, a need to confirm something, anything that might explain the ache creeping up her spine. She typed in the university's name, then Mayfield Scholarship, then founding donor. The page loaded slowly, as if it knew she wasn't ready, and then she saw it. The Sarah Mayfield Memorial Endowment, established in 2023 by a private benefactor in honor of Sarah Mayfield, a woman known for her unwavering belief in character, resilience, and quiet courage. Annual award, full tuition for students who meet strict criteria for both financial need and personal integrity. The scholarship had already received over 500 applications for the upcoming year. Beneath that, a quote in gold text, "In honor of a woman who saw value in character, not status." Below that, his name, full, unmistakable. No title, no accolades, just the man she once reduced to temporary, the placeholder, the one she thought she'd outgrow. Her hand trembled on the trackpad, her eyes burned. She tried to scroll further, but the words kept pulling her back. Not just because he had written them, but because he had written them asterisk about asterisk her mother. Not asterisk to asterisk her, not asterisk for asterisk her. About the woman who saw through the noise, who had said more than once, "He sees you clearer than you see yourself." Back then, she'd thought it was just maternal projection, the sentimentality of a woman facing death and clinging to anyone who stayed. Now, she saw it for what it was, a warning, a prophecy, a mirror. She closed the tab, folded the letter again, and tried to slide it back into the envelope, but she couldn't quite get it right. The corners wouldn't align. The paper refused to fit the way it had. She stared at her desk for a long time. She didn't cry. She couldn't. This wasn't grief. It was a realization too sharp for tears. She hadn't just lost him. She had lost the version of herself he once believed in, and all he had left behind was the truth. One sentence, one scholarship, one legacy. And none of it had her name on it. The email she received from the graduate program had the subject line, "Next steps for your application." Neutral, bland, bureaucratic. She clicked it, half hoping it would be a polite rejection. It wasn't. Instead, it offered her a brief phone interview. Nothing formal, just a conversation. The school was good, not Ivy League, but close. The kind of place where networking happened in seminar lounges and first-year students had professional profiles cleaner than most resumes. She'd applied on a whim, thinking that if she just moved forward fast enough, the past wouldn't catch up. If she earned a new title, built a new brand, no one would ask about the one she'd left behind. She showed up early, wore something conservative, and pulled her hair back. Minimal makeup. She didn't want to look like someone chasing attention anymore. She just wanted to look capable, measured, rebranded. The admissions officer was polite, mid-50s, academic, but relaxed. He reviewed her application while sipping lukewarm coffee. Your grades are decent, he said finally. Not standout, but a consistent record. A few faculty recommendations. She nodded, waiting for the but. Then he glanced at the top of her file again. Mayfield. That name's familiar. Here it comes. He looked up. Any relation to the Mayfield Scholarship at your alma mater? She forced a smile. It came out wrong, strained, mechanical. Yes, she said after a pause that was too long to be casual. That was my mother. His eyebrows lifted. Really? Well, that's something. That fund has become quite a cornerstone for them. Helped some remarkable students. One of our applicants last year turned down 2 Ivy League offers just to stay local and study under the terms of that scholarship. She nodded again, unsure whether to thank him or change the subject. The man continued, unaware, or maybe just unwilling to stop. That fund changed a lot of things. The committee that created it was extremely selective. I remember when it launched the quietest 6-figure donation we'd ever heard of. No press, no gala, just a letter, a quote, and a deposit. He smiled, started by a man who knew how to honor real integrity. Her throat tightened. The words stung more than any insult because they weren't meant to hurt. They weren't barbs, they were praise. Just not for her. The interview ended soon after. Cordial, professional. They said they'd be in touch. She didn't wait. She left the building and wandered the hallway, trying to find the exit but ending up somewhere worse. The Hall of Legacy, a place she used to mock when she was still a student. Plaque chasers, she used to say. People who think bronze on a wall means anything. But it meant something now. She paused in front of the plaque wall, telling herself she was just curious. But her eyes found it instantly. There, on the center panel, new, clean, permanent, was the Sarah Mayfield Memorial Endowment. Beneath the title, the university's custom engraving, in honor of a woman who believed in character over charm. And below that, the founding donor's name. Not in gold, not oversized, just there, quiet, present, real. She searched the wall again, just in case. Her own name didn't appear once. Not as a contributor, not as a recipient, not even in the footnotes. Nothing. She had been the connection, the bloodline, the daughter. And still, she had become irrelevant to the very legacy her family name now carried. She reached out, almost touched the plaque, then pulled her hand back. It didn't belong to her. It never had. She had mocked him behind his back, whispered about him at parties, called him a phase, a stepping stone, a filler between the life she wanted and the one she was escaping. But in the end, he didn't confront her. He didn't post online. He didn't burn her things or scream in public or try to reclaim some wounded pride. He didn't yell. He wrote a check and rewrote the story, without her.